Have you ever signed something that changed your life forever without realizing what you'd truly agreed to? The ink had barely dried when Alara felt the weight of a torn invisible chain that bound her future to a man she barely knew. The room still smelled of fresh paper and rain, the storm outside hammering against the glass like it wanted to stop her. But it was already too late. The contract was signed. The terms were simple. 1 year of marriage. No love, no expectations, no emotional attachment. Just a deal. He was Aiden Vale, the youngest heir to the Vale dynasty, a man whispered about more than he was ever seen, a name that carried power like a storm cloud, quiet, distant, but always ready to strike. The kind of man who didn't smile because the world had taught him not to. And Alara, she was a nobody, a struggling artist living on borrowed time and borrowed money. Her mother's hospital bills were drowning her. Every day she watched the numbers rise, and every night she told herself she'd find a way. Until Aiden's lawyer came knocking with an offer that sounded like salvation wrapped in silk. Marriage, they said, would benefit them both. His family demanded stability. She needed money. And so, between desperation and disbelief, she said yes. But no one warned her that sometimes, pretending to love someone is far more dangerous than truly falling for them. The first time she saw Aiden in person was on their wedding day. He arrived late. No tuxedo, no smile, just a crisp suit and a gaze sharp enough to cut glass. The ceremony took place in a quiet garden, far from the city, with only a handful of witnesses. The sky was overcast, and the air carried the scent of rain and roses sweet and cold. He didn't look at her when he said "I do." Neither did she. Afterward, they drove to his estate in silence. A mansion carved into the side of a hill, overlooking the grey ocean. The house looked like it had been built for ghosts, vast, echoing, and full of things left unsaid. Aiden showed her to her room, separate wings, separate lives. "This is an arrangement," he said, his voice calm but distant. "Don't mistake it for anything else." Alara nodded, though her heart ached a little at the certainty in his tone. He spoke as if he had already rehearsed the line 1,000 times before. For weeks they lived like strangers bound by ceremony. The staff whispered about them in corridors. Their footsteps echoed through the marble halls. He worked late into the night. She painted by the window, letting the sound of the waves fill the silence between them. But beneath that stillness, something began to shift. It started small, a passing glance at breakfast, a word of concern when she tripped in the garden. Then, one night, she found him standing alone in the library, staring at an old photograph, his mother, perhaps. His expression was softer than she'd ever seen it. For a moment, he looked human-haunted, but human. When he noticed her watching, he didn't speak. He simply nodded once, as if acknowledging something fragile between them that neither dared name. Days turned into weeks. The pretense began to blur. He started leaving coffee for her in the mornings, though he never said it was from him. She began learning the rhythm of his footsteps, the subtle ways his silence meant care. It was easy to forget the contract when the light hit his face just right, when his rare laughter broke through the walls he'd built, when she found herself painting him over and over again without meaning to. But love, when forbidden, burns differently. It's quieter, heavier. It lives in the spaces where words should be. One evening, as the sun bled orange across the horizon, Aiden came to her studio. She was painting the ocean, the same view they shared from opposite ends of the house. He stood behind her for a long time, watching the brush glide across canvas. "You always paint the sea," he said. "It doesn't ask questions," she replied. He smiled faintly. "It hides more than it shows." Their eyes met in the reflection of the window, and in that single glance, something broke. The line between duty and desire, between what they had signed and what they had begun to feel, it all started to fade. But reality has a cruel way of reminding dreamers where they stand. The next morning, a headline blazed across every newspaper in the city. Aiden Vale engaged in secret marriage, business empire in uproar. Paparazzi camped outside the gates. Investors panicked. His father, cold, calculating, summoned him to the family estate. The marriage, once a quiet arrangement, was now a public scandal. And when Ilara heard him on the phone that night, his voice sharp, controlled, saying the words, "It's just temporary. I'll handle it," something inside her cracked. She remembered the contract, the fine print, the line that read, "Either party may dissolve the agreement upon mutual consent before the 1-year term." Maybe she'd been foolish to think this could ever be real, but the heart is a traitor. In the days that followed, they barely spoke. The house felt colder. She stopped painting. He buried himself in work. Every now and then she'd catch him staring at her across the dinner table, but neither dared to speak first. Until one night, during a storm that rattled the windows, he found her on the balcony, drenched in rain. She turned when she heard his footsteps. "Why did you do it?" she asked. "Why me?" For a moment he didn't answer. The thunder rolled like a confession waiting to happen. Then he said quietly, "Because you reminded me of someone I used to be." The words hung in the air raw, unfinished. He stepped closer, his voice low. "Before all this, before the money, the name, the lies, I used to believe in something. And then I met you." Ilara felt the world tilt. The rain softened, the sound of it blending with her heartbeat. "I can't do this anymore," she whispered. "Pretend it's just a contract." Aiden's gaze darkened, not with anger, but with fear. The kind of fear that only comes from realizing you have something to lose. He took a step closer than another. The space between them vanished. His hand brushed her cheek, trembling slightly, as if afraid she might disappear. But before he could speak, headlights cut through the storm. A black car pulled up the driveway. A man in a suit stepped out. Aiden's father. The old man's expression was stone. His eyes moved from Aiden to Alara, cold and assessing. Inside, he said. Now they followed him into the study where the storm's light flickered against the walls. On the desk lay a document. Another contract. This marriage ends tonight, the elder Vale said. You've done enough damage to this family's reputation. The girl will be compensated. You'll sign this, and it will be as if it never happened. Aiden stood still, silent. Alara looked at him, waiting, hoping he'd say something, anything, but his jaw tightened. His silence was louder than any protest. She realized then that the war between love and obligation wasn't one he could win, not yet. With a trembling hand, she reached for the pen, but as the paper brushed against her fingertips, Aiden's hand closed over hers. Firm, unyielding. Not this time, he said. His father's eyes flared. You don't understand what's at stake. I do, Aiden replied quietly. For once, I actually do. Alara's breath caught. The room felt smaller, the storm louder. The elder Vale leaned forward. You think this is love? You're confusing pity for passion. And when she's gone, when you lose everything, don't come crawling back. Aiden didn't move, didn't blink then. Let it all fall, he said. The silence that followed was heavier than thunder. His father turned, fury twisting his features. You'll regret this. And then he was gone, the door slamming behind him. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The rain softened to a whisper. Alara finally turned to Aiden. You didn't have to do that. He looked at her, really looked tan for the first time. There was no mask, no distance, only truth. I know, he said softly. But I wanted to. Outside, the storm broke, and the first fragile light of dawn began to creep through the windows. Yet even as hope began to rise in her chest, Alara couldn't shake the feeling that something else was coming. A shadow beneath the calm. Because some contracts aren't written on paper. They're written in secrets, and Aiden Vale's past was about to collect its debt. The knock came just before sunrise. 3 sharp raps on the door. Alara froze. Aiden turned toward the sound. When he opened it, a man in a dark coat stood waiting, rain dripping from his hat, eyes unreadable. He handed Aiden a sealed envelope. This was never supposed to reach her, the man said quietly, and as Aiden tore it open, his expression changed slowly, then completely. Whatever he read inside drained the color from his face. Alara took a step forward. What is it? He looked up at her, eyes full of something she'd never seen before. Here, then he whispered her name, almost brokenly. Alara, who told you about me? The paper slipped from his hand, falling soundlessly to the floor. And on it, in perfect, elegant handwriting, was a single sentence. The contract was never meant to bind you to him. It was meant to save him from you. The silence after the words hung in the air like smoke. Alara stared at the paper lying between them, its edges damp from the rain seeping in through the open door. The ink glistened faintly, each word like a wound she didn't understand. The contract was never meant to bind you to him. It was meant to save him from you. Her heartbeat felt foreign, like it belonged to someone else. Aiden's eyes were still fixed on the page, his breath shallow, his jaw locked. Aiden, she whispered, what does it mean? He didn't answer. He just stood there, the muscles in his neck tightening as he read the line again, as if searching for something between the letters. Then, without a word, he crossed the room, grabbed his coat, and headed toward the door. Wait, where are you going? I need to know who sent this. Alara followed him into the hallway, her bare feet cold against the marble floor. The house seemed to breathe with them, its walls echoing every hurried step. Outside, the rain had stopped, but the world still smelled of storm and salt. The man who had delivered the letter was gone, leaving only tire tracks vanishing into the fog. Aiden looked down the road, his eyes narrowing. This isn't random, he murmured. Someone knows something they shouldn't. He turned back to her, his expression softening only slightly. Stay inside, please. The plea in his voice made her hesitate. For all his control, there was something raw beneath his words, fear, maybe even guilt. When the door closed behind him, the silence became unbearable. She picked up the letter again, tracing the handwriting with her fingertip. It was elegant, deliberate, as if the writer knew exactly what they were doing. The seal on the envelope, a crest of a serpent coiled around a key, felt oddly familiar. She remembered seeing it once before, faintly embossed on the edge of Aiden's mother's portrait in the library. Her pulse quickened. She found herself walking down the long corridor toward the east wing, where the library stood like a monument to secrets. The scent of old paper and cedar filled the air. The rain outside had quieted into a soft mist that blurred the windows. The portrait hung above the fireplace, Aiden's mother, her gaze distant, her smile touched with sadness. Alara reached out, running her hand along the frame. And there it was, the same insignia, carved subtly into the wood, half hidden beneath the paint, a serpent, guarding a key. She pressed her fingers against it. Something clicked. A faint mechanical sound echoed from behind the shelves. One of the bookcases shifted slightly, revealing a narrow gap. Alara hesitated, her breath shallow. then pushed it open just enough to slip inside. The space beyond was small, lit only by the thin line of light seeping through the crack. Dust danced in the air. On the far wall stood an old wooden desk, a stack of yellowed papers, and a single photograph. Aiden Younger, barely in his 20s, standing beside a woman who wasn't her. She looked familiar, not because Alara had met her, but because she shared her face. Almost, her stomach turned. She reached for the papers on the desk. Most were contracts, financial records, property documents, but one was marked differently. A folder labeled Project Nereid. Inside were letters, medical reports, and a single sentence scrawled across the top page. Subject resemblance, 98%. Proceed with behavioral conditioning. Her hand trembled. She barely heard the door open behind her until Aiden spoke, his voice low, breathless. You shouldn't be in here. Alara turned slowly. His hair was wet from the rain, his eyes shadowed with exhaustion. He looked not angry, but defeated. He stepped forward, running a hand through his hair. Someone who shouldn't exist anymore. That's not an answer, he sighed, the weight of it filling the room. Her name was Liana Vale, my mother's research assistant. My fiancé, Ilara's well-tilted fiancé. It was years ago, he said quickly, as if trying to pull the words back. Before the accident. Before everything changed. What accident? She died, he said finally. Oh, that's what I thought. There was a fire in one of the labs my mother was funding. They said Liana was inside. But later, strange things started happening. Letters, photographs, messages from people who claimed to have seen her. I tried to find the truth, but my father buried it all. He said it would destroy the family if I kept digging. He looked at her, his voice quiet. Someone wants me to believe she's still alive, or that you're connected to her. He stepped closer, eyes searching hers. That's what I don't understand. You look exactly like her, Alara. The same voice, the same expressions. When I first saw you, I thought, it couldn't be, but the resemblance, it's beyond coincidence. The words hit her like cold water. For a long time, she said nothing. The crackle of the fireplace was the only sound between them. He closed his eyes. It started that way, but it didn't stay that way. The sincerity in his voice was undeniable, but it didn't dull the ache in her chest. He turned away, staring into the shadows of the secret room. My mother believed she could perfect memory, not just preserve it, but transplant it, recreate the essence of a person in another mind. She called it continuity. She thought it could save humanity from loss. Alara's voice trembled. You're saying she wanted to bring people back from the dead? He looked at her then, his expression a mix of wonder and fear. And the last person she ever tried that with was Liana. The room felt smaller, the air colder. I don't know, Aiden admitted. I don't want to believe it. But the letter, the symbol, your face, everything points to something my family never wanted uncovered. Ilara's thoughts spun in chaos. Her life, her memories, were they truly hers? She thought of the recurring dreams she'd had since childhood. Faces she couldn't name. A house that felt both strange and familiar. She turned back to the desk, scanning the documents again. Among the letters was a smaller note dated only 2 months ago. It read, the activation is complete. The subject will awaken upon emotional convergence. Aiden reached for the letter, but she pulled it away. What does this mean? Aiden, what did your mother do to me? A low hum filled the air, mechanical, almost alive. Then a voice, faint but distinct, came from the intercom system. Aiden Vale, it said. You've gone too far. Aiden froze. Who is this? The voice didn't reply. Instead, a video feed blinked to life on the old television in the corner of the library. Grainy, flickering static cleared to reveal a woman standing in a white lab coat. Her face was pale, her eyes too calm. Alara, the woman said, her tone clinical, almost gentle. If you're seeing this, then the second phase has begun. Alara's knees nearly gave way. Who are you? The woman smiled faintly. You already know. You've been dreaming of me for years. Aiden took a step forward. Mother. The woman's gaze flicked to him, emotionless. You should have stayed away from the past, Aiden. It was meant to protect you. Alara's breath came in short bursts. Protect him from what? From you, the recording said. The screen went black. For a long time, there was only the sound of rain. Aiden pressed a hand to his forehead. She's been dead for 10 years. This isn't possible. Alara stumbled backward, her heart pounding. If she recorded this, if she planned all of this, then none of this was random. He finished, his voice hollow. The generator hummed back to life, flooding the room with pale light. The walls seemed to close in around them. Aiden moved to the desk, searching through the remaining documents. His hands shook. There has to be something here, some clue. But before he could finish, Alara's gaze caught on the window. Down the winding road, headlights approached through the mist. Several cars, black sedans, no license plates. They're coming, she said. Aiden looked up. They ran through the halls, down the grand staircase, the echo of their footsteps colliding with the sound of approaching engines. Aiden grabbed her hand, leading her toward the back entrance. Take the path through the woods, he said urgently. It leads to the cliffs. There's a boat docked there. She stopped. You're coming with me, he hesitated. I have to destroy what's left in that room. If they find it, they'll use it again. The fear in his voice tore at her. No, she said. I'm not leaving without you. The front doors burst open downstairs. Voices shouted. Flashlights cut through the dark. Aiden met her eyes. "Alara, please." She shook her head, gripping his hand tighter. "Then we run together," and they did. Through corridors lit by flashes of lightning. Through the rain that had started again in furious sheets. The sound of pursuit grew closer. Boots, radios, shouts carried by the storm. Aiden turned back one last time, staring at the house. "Everything I've ever known," he said quietly, "was built on a lie." Alara looked at him, her voice trembling. "Then let's start over." Alara froze. Aiden staggered, his hand clutching his side, crimson spreading across his shirt. "No." She caught him as he fell, the rain mixing with the blood between her fingers. In the distance, shadows moved closer. She pressed her forehead to his. "You're coming with me." And somewhere behind the curtain of rain, a figure stood watching, silent, still her face identical to Alara's. The woman turned, disappearing into the mist. Alara looked up, heartbreaking, realization burning through her tears. There weren't two of them. There had always been three. The sound of the gunshot still hung in the air when everything else went silent. The rain slowed, the wind stilled, and even the world seemed to hold its breath. Alara knelt beside Aiden, her trembling hands pressing against the wound, though she knew somewhere deep inside that the bleeding was too much, too fast. His breath came in shallow bursts, each one fainter than the last. The storm washed away the blood almost as soon as it appeared, streaking it across the stones like an unfinished signature. "Stay with me," she whispered, her voice cracking, but Aiden didn't answer. His eyes were open, unfocused, staring at something she couldn't see. When the final breath left him, it was so soft it almost felt like the rain had taken it away. For a moment, she couldn't move. The silence was unbearable. Then a low hum broke through the stillness, a mechanical vibration beneath her feet. The ground seemed to tremble faintly. She looked up. The lights from the estate flickered to life again, windows glowing like watchful eyes. A sound, sharp and precise, came from the direction of the wood's radio static. Then the crunch of boots approaching. The air was thick with the scent of ozone and salt. Alara stood slowly, her body numb, and stumbled backward toward the trees. Branches clawed at her clothes as she ran. Behind her, beams of light cut through the fog, and the indistinct voices of men echoed, organized, methodical. They weren't searching blindly. They knew exactly where to go. She ran until her lungs burned, until her vision blurred. Then she saw it, the faint outline of the cliffs, jagged and slick with rain. At the edge stood a figure, the same woman she had seen before, the same face, the same stillness. Alara stopped, breathless, heart pounding so hard it hurt. The woman turned slowly. Up close, the resemblance was impossible to deny. Every feature mirrored her own except the eyes. The other woman's were colder, almost metallic in their precision. "You shouldn't have come this far," the woman said, her voice eerily calm. Alara's throat was dry. "Who are you?" The woman tilted her head slightly, studying her. "You still don't see it, do you? You're not supposed to be awake yet." Alara shook her head. "I don't understand. What do you mean, awake?" The woman stepped closer, her movements measured, deliberate. "You were never meant to live beyond the boundaries of the experiment. But when Aiden broke protocol, it changed everything. He triggered the convergence too soon." "Alara," the woman said quietly, "you are the continuation of Liana Vale." The words hit with the force of a wave. Alara felt her knees weaken. "That's not possible," she said. "I'm me. I have memories, a past, a life." The woman nodded. "Yes, constructed ones, designed from fragments of hers, adapted to survive in a different world. You were never meant to remember the original identity, only to continue her essence. But emotion is unpredictable. It reactivates what logic tries to bury." Alara's voice trembled. "And you, what are you?" "I'm what came before you," the woman replied. "The first continuation. The prototype that failed." The words settled between them like fog. Alara's mind raced, replaying everything, her strange dreams. The familiarity of Aiden's voice, the inexplicable déjà vu she'd always felt inside the Vale estate. Each memory now felt fragile, manufactured, failed. She asked. The woman smiled faintly. "I wasn't stable. The emotional imprint fractured. I remembered too much of what wasn't mine. Your design was meant to correct that, to remove the instability by limiting memory recall. But Aiden interfered. He thought love could anchor you." "Love." The word burned in her chest. The woman's gaze softened for the first time. He was wrong. Of course, love doesn't anchor, it awakens. And now, because of him, you remember enough to threaten everything. Behind them, the sound of engines drew closer. A helicopter now, cutting through the mist, searchlight sweeping across the cliffs. The woman turned toward the noise, her jaw tightening. "They'll take you if they find you," she said. "You won't survive the retrieval." Alara took a step back. "Why are you helping me?" "Because I've seen what happens to those who try to erase themselves," the woman said. "You still have a choice. You can disappear, or you can finish what we started." The light from the helicopter flooded over them, momentarily blinding. The woman turned, pushing something into Alara's hand, a small metal key, old and cold against her skin. "Go east," she said quickly. "There's a storage facility beneath the old Marine Observatory. The truth is there." But be careful who you trust. Your memories lie, even when you don't. Before Elara could ask anything else, the woman stepped backward. 1-2 steps and vanished over the cliff's edge into the fog. Elara stood frozen, the roar of the wind filling her ears. She didn't see a body fall, just the mist swallowing everything. When the light swung toward her, she ran. The forest seemed alive with motion shadows darting between trees, the buzz of drones overhead. Her breath came ragged, her body moving on instinct. She followed the coastline, guided only by the beam of the lighthouse far in the distance. Hours later, when dawn broke pale and cold, she found the observatory. It stood abandoned, its glass dome shattered, walls covered in ivy and rust. Inside, everything smelled of metal and dust. She descended a narrow staircase into the basement, where an electronic keypad blinked faintly. The key fit perfectly into a slot beside it. The mechanism whirred, and the door slid open with a hiss. The room beyond was sterile and bright. Computers lined the walls, humming softly. In the center stood a glass chamber empty, except for the faint outline of a figure etched in frost on the inside. She approached slowly. The control panel beside it displayed a date. June 17th. The day she had met Aiden for the first time. Next to it, a series of log entries scrolled across the screen. Phase I complete. Emotional imprint stable. Phase 2. Subject introduced to variable AV. Reaction exceeds prediction. Phase 3. Containment breach likely. Prepare reset protocol. Elara's hands shook as she reached for the keyboard. There were encrypted files, videos, reports, audio diaries. She clicked one at random. A voice filled the room, her own voice. This is Elara, test sequence 47. Emotional recall, inconsistent. I keep dreaming of water. Sometimes I see his face before I wake. I think I was someone else before this, but the memories feel borrowed. They don't belong to me, but they ache like they do. She stumbled backward, pressing a hand to her mouth. Her heart raced. The next recording began automatically. The voice that spoke was Aiden. She doesn't know yet. I can't tell her. If she finds out what she really is, the synchronization will fail. But I can't stop feeling it, like she's more real than any of us. Maybe that's what love is, or maybe I'm just falling for a ghost. The file ended with static. Elara sank to the floor, the metal cold beneath her palms. Her thoughts spun, collapsing into one painful truth. She had never been free. Not from the contract, not from the lies, not even from her own body. Everything, every memory, every emotion had been part of an experiment she didn't consent to. And yet, something inside her refused to break. She thought of Aiden's last words, the plea in his fading voice. Don't let them erase you. Slowly, she stood. Her reflection in the chamber's glass looked back at her, tired, pale, but alive. If she was a continuation, then she could still choose what came next. The sound of footsteps echoed from the hall. She turned sharply. A man in a dark coat stepped into the light. He wasn't one of the soldiers from before. His demeanor was too calm, too deliberate. Elara Vale, he said softly. You've come far. Who are you? She demanded. He smiled faintly. Someone who kept you alive long enough to finish what Liana started. He stepped closer, his gaze sharp but not unkind. Your mother's research wasn't about immortality, it was about redemption. She was trying to save what humanity lost the ability to feel without fear of pain. Elara stared at him, confusion and anger colliding. You're saying all of this, everything was to teach people how to love again. Not people, he corrected. You, because you're the only one who still can. Before she could speak, alarms blared overhead. The screens flickered, showing multiple feeds, armed men entering the facility. The man looked toward the monitors, then back at her. It's too late to hide, but if you want the truth, follow the path she left. The data core is below this floor. It holds everything: her mind, your origin, the reason he had to die. He pressed a small device into her hand. Take this. It'll open the vault. Decide for yourself whether you want to remember. Then he turned, disappearing into the shadows as the door burst open behind him. Elara clutched the device and ran. Down narrow corridors, past flickering lights, through air thick with dust and sirens. The hallway ended in a sealed vault door. She inserted the device. The lock disengaged with a low hum. Inside, the chamber glowed blue. A single console pulsed in the darkness, its surface alive with shifting light. On the screen, one final message awaited. Memory synchronization complete. Awaiting activation. Elara hesitated. Her reflection shimmered in the glow, layered with another Leon. If she touched the console, she would know everything. But she also knew that some truths could end her entirely. Her hand hovered above the surface, trembling. Somewhere above, explosions shook the ground. The facility lights dimmed, then flickered out. In the silence that followed, she whispered, almost to herself, who was I meant to be, and who did I become instead? And as her fingers finally touched the console, the world around her dissolved into light. Light that was all there was, at first pure, soundless, infinite light. It flooded her mind like the tide breaking over a dam. Elara couldn't tell if her eyes were open or closed, if she was still standing in the vault or suspended somewhere between time and memory. The light wasn't just around her, it was inside her, threading through her thoughts, dissolving the boundaries of what she'd once called herself. Then came the images, flashes, fragments, a pair of hands adjusting a microscope, trembling with exhaustion, a young woman laughing in a garden full of glass vials and sunlight, a voice whispering behind her ear, "If memory can live, maybe love can too." Liana's voice. Ilara gasped as the scene shifted again. Fire, smoke, alarms, screaming, the lab collapsing in chaos. Someone shouting her name. Aiden's voice, desperate. She saw him pulling her through flames, saw the way the glass shattered above them, and then everything blurred into white again. She fell to her knees, her body convulsing as the visions flooded in. But these weren't just memories, they were emotions, grief, longing, hope that refused to die. She could feel them, not as borrowed sensations, but as if they were being rewritten into her blood. When she opened her eyes, she was still in the vault. The console had gone dark, its once living glow now a faint pulse, but something had changed. She could feel the world differently, the hum of electricity, the vibration of distant engines above, even the rhythm of her own heartbeat sinking to something older, deeper. For the first time, she remembered everything. She remembered being Liana Valve, a woman who had loved Aiden before the world had taken him away. She remembered the research, the obsession with continuity, the moment she'd realized her own mind was fracturing. The experiments weren't meant to cheat death. They were meant to separate consciousness from the body to preserve emotion when flesh failed, but the cost had been unbearable. And then she remembered the accident wasn't an accident. It had been ordered. Aiden's father. The realization cut through her like ice. He'd burned it all, her lab, her research, her life, because she'd gone too far. But she hadn't died. She'd been copied, replicated, reshaped into something he could control. The continuation, Ilara and the others before her, had been his way of keeping her under surveillance, a weapon disguised as a ghost. Ilara staggered to her feet, her hands trembling. Her reflection on the console screen flickered between her face and Liana's, two lives merging into one. She was both, and yet neither. The ground trembled again, harder this time. Dust rained down from the ceiling. Somewhere above the facility was collapsing. The faint sound of gunfire echoed through the corridors. She turned and ran. The stairwell leading out of the vault was half collapsed. The walls cracked open like old scars. Each step was slick with water dripping from ruptured pipes. The deeper she climbed, the louder the chaos became. Voices, orders shouted through radios, metal clashing against stone. The air smelled of ozone and burning circuits. When she reached the main corridor, she saw them, armed men in black uniforms, faces obscured by visors. They moved with military precision, sweeping the area. She ducked behind a support pillar just as two of them passed, their boots thudding against the metal floor. "Status," one of them said. Through his the target's signature is fluctuating. She's still inside, but we're losing containment. Orders are to retrieve or neutralize. The words hit her like a spark. Neutralize. She was an experiment, not a person. The rage that rose inside her wasn't human, it was something larger, older. The sound of her heartbeat grew louder until it drowned out everything else. She closed her eyes, and suddenly the air shifted. The lights above them flickered, then exploded. Electricity arced through the corridor, searing the air in a blinding flash. The soldiers dropped, their radios crackling with static. Ilara stumbled backward, terrified of herself. The metal beneath her fingers still hummed with power. It wasn't just adrenaline. Something inside her had awakened fully, the energy that had been dormant in Liana's experiments. The ability to manipulate the neural resonance field. Continuity had become more than memory. It had become power. She didn't wait to understand it. She ran again, up the last flight of stairs until she burst into the open air. The dawn sky was bleeding gray over the sea. Smoke rose from the cliffs where the Vale estate once stood. The mansion was gone, collapsed, burning. A faint trail of flames licked the horizon, reflecting on the water like veins of molten glass. Ilara fell to her knees on the wet grass, breathing hard. Every muscle in her body screamed. The taste of iron filled her mouth. But beneath the exhaustion there was something else, clarity. Aiden's words came back to her, softer now, carried by the wind. "Don't let them erase you." She wasn't going to. The sound of engines drew her attention. A black helicopter hovered above the ruins, its searchlight cutting through the smoke. And in the distance, she saw another figure climbing the ridge, familiar posture, deliberate steps. Her breath caught. The woman from the cliffs, alive, the prototype. She turned, locking eyes with Ilara from across the field. For a moment, neither moved. Then the woman called out, her voice barely audible over the wind. "They'll come for both of us now. But you're the one they really want." Ilara stood, her hair whipping across her face. "Then help me stop them." The woman hesitated. "You don't understand. You can't stop them, you are them." The words echoed between them before Ilara could respond. The prototype threw something toward her, a small, black capsule. It landed in the grass at her feet. "If you want to know what you are, open it," she shouted. "But if you want to stay human, run." Then she turned and disappeared into the smoke, vanishing as quickly as she'd appeared. Ilara picked up the capsule. It was smooth and cold, no larger than a coin. A digital timer on its surface blinked faintly, 0:59. Counting down. She froze. The wind howled louder. The timer kept ticking. Instinct told her to throw it away, but something deeper whispered that this was what she had been searching for all along. 50 seconds. She pressed the side of the capsule. A faint projection flickered above a holographic recording. The image sharpened into a man's face, Aiden's father. By now, his voice said, calm and deliberate, "You've discovered the truth my son never understood. You are the key to the continuity protocol. My wife's genius created the mechanism, but only your consciousness could stabilize it. You are not her continuation, Ilara. You are the final version Liana's perfected design. The moment you connected with the core, the protocol completed. You are now connected to every network, every neural field tied to her research. You can save this world or end it." The recording paused as the timer hit 30 seconds. His voice deepened, colder. "But remember, continuity is not life, it's control. And control, my dear, was always the true experiment." The hologram faded. Ilara's breath came shallow. The capsule ticked down to 10 seconds. She hurled it toward the sea just as it detonated. No explosion, only a pulse. A deep, soundless shock wave rippled through the air, bending the light, making the horizon twist. She stumbled backward as visions flooded her against City's people, machines all connected by glowing threads of energy. She could feel their thoughts, their memories, their fears. The continuity network was real, and she was inside it. The world pulsed once more, and then everything went still. Ilara stood trembling, staring at her reflection in the water pooled at her feet. Her eyes glowed faintly, veins of light weaving beneath her skin. She could feel the entire network humming inside her chest like a second heartbeat. Then a sound cut through the air. Footsteps on gravel. From the edge of the smoke, a figure emerged, battered, bloodied, but unmistakably alive. Ilara's breath caught in her throat. For a moment, all the noise, all the chaos, vanished. He looked at her, eyes wide, disbelief shadowing his face. Ilara, she took a step forward, then stopped. Something in his gaze changed, not wonder, but recognition. "I saw you," he whispered, "in the fire. You weren't human." She wanted to speak, to tell him everything, that she remembered him, that she had loved him long before either of them understood what love meant, but the words wouldn't come. The air between them vibrated. The light beneath her skin grew brighter. Aiden flinched, fear flickering across his face. "What have they done to you?" She shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks. "They made me remember." He stepped closer, the distance between them closing like the slow tightening of fate. "Then tell me who you really are." Ilara opened her mouth to answer, but before she could, the ground beneath them shuddered violently. The cliff split open, revealing a metallic structure beneath the soil, rising like a buried cathedral awakening. The hum of machines roared to life beneath their feet. A voice, her voice, multiplied and mechanical, echoed through the air. "Continuity complete. System override in progress." Aiden turned toward the sound, horror dawning in his eyes. "Ilara, what did you do?" She looked at him, realization dawning with equal terror. "I didn't. It's doing it on its own." The earth trembled harder, the metallic towers unfolding toward the sky. The sea boiled against the shore, the clouds spiraling inward as the light from the structure illuminated everything in blinding white. Ilara stumbled backward, clutching her chest. The glow beneath her skin pulsed in rhythm with the machine's hum, and in that moment, she understood she wasn't just part of the system, she was the system. Her reflection in the fractured glass of the rising structure stared back at her, flickering between Ilara and Liana, human and something far beyond. Aiden reached for her, shouting her name over the roar. But before she could take his hand, the world erupted in light once again, and everything dissolved into silence. Light broke the world apart. Not sunlight, something older, sharper, alive. It consumed everything in a brilliance so vast that for an instant, the line between matter and memory vanished. There was no sky, no sea, no ground, only the pulse of energy, the hum of existence folding in on itself. Then came the sound, not of machines, not of collapse, but of breathing, hers, ragged, human. Ilara opened her eyes to find herself standing in a void of shimmering glass. Every direction reflected fragments of her past, Liana's hands in the lab, the fire, Aiden's face, the moment of her awakening. They floated around her like ghosts trapped inside crystal. Each reflection whispered her name in a different tone, pleading, angry, afraid. "Continuity complete," said a voice that wasn't hers yet, came from within. It resonated through the space like a second heartbeat. "System identity confirmed." The words rippled through the air, and suddenly the glass shattered outward, revealing the continuity core in its true form, a colossal structure suspended above an endless chasm, made of living light. Its center pulsed with rhythm, as if the planet itself was breathing through it. Ilara stood on a platform that seemed woven from strands of memory, each one glowing softly beneath her feet. Across the expanse, a figure appeared in. He was still there, though everything else had dissolved. His clothes were torn, his skin smeared with ash, but his eyes were steady, focused on her as if holding her in place through will alone. "Ilara," he said, his voice trembling but clear. "Can you hear me?" She tried to speak, but her words came out fractured, layered with static. "I don't know if I'm still here." "You are," he said, taking a careful step closer. "You're right here," but she wasn't sure. Her reflection in the shifting air flickered, not flesh, but light shaped like a person. The threads connecting her to the core pulsed in sync with her breath. She could feel everything, every signal, every network, every heartbeat connected to the continuity protocol. Humanity was inside her now, whispering, pulsing, yearning. "This is what they built," she said quietly. A bridge between thought and machine. Aiden's eyes filled with disbelief. "They built you." The words struck her like a tremor. "No," she said, shaking her head. "They built an echo. I was supposed to be Liana's salvation, her second chance, but all I am is her shadow." The platform trembled beneath them. The lights around the core began to pulse faster, brighter. Data streams shot through the air like auroras. Somewhere deep inside the system, something was activating a sequence she didn't understand. Aiden reached out. "Then stop it, Ilara. You can shut it down." She looked at him, her eyes glowing like fractured stars. "If I shut it down, I die. Everything connected to me dies with it." He froze. "What do you mean?" "The continuity network," she whispered. "It's not just data, it's people. Minds that were copied, pieces of consciousness that were stored when their bodies failed. If I disconnect, I erase them." Aiden's expression broke. "So you'd be saving the world by killing it?" She nodded, tears glinting in the strange light. The same choice Liana faced before she burned. The hum grew louder, vibrating through her bones. The reflections in the air shifted again, Liana's face now visible in the lattice of light. Looking back at her with calm sorrow, "Ilara," the voice said softly, "you've come further than I did. But you know how this ends." She stepped forward, staring at the vision. "Why did you leave me here?" "To finish what I couldn't," Liana said. "To see what I was too afraid to see, that love cannot be engineered, and memory cannot replace a soul." Ilara's hands trembled. "But I feel it. I feel everything. Doesn't that make it real? Real enough to break you," Liana whispered. "And maybe that's enough." The reflection faded. A silence heavier than any sound filled the void. Aiden took another step closer. The edges of his form began to flicker. He was bleeding into the same light, being drawn toward the core. "Ilara, listen to me. Whatever you are, whoever you are, you don't have to let them define it. You can choose what this becomes." She looked at him, tears turning to light on her cheeks. "And if I choose wrong, then we'll fall together," he said simply. The world began to crack. The continuity core surged, its energy expanding outward, threads of light wrapping around them both. She could feel the network inside her unraveling, every stored consciousness calling out, every echo of humanity clinging to existence. It was unbearable. She pressed her hands to her chest, as if to hold herself together. "I can hear them," she gasped. "All of them, billions. They're afraid." "Then set them free," Aiden said. Her breath caught. Freedom meant erasure, oblivion. But maybe that was the point. The platform split beneath their feet. Aiden stumbled, reaching for her. She caught his hand, their fingers locking through the haze of light. For one fragile second, everything stilled, the chaos, the trembling, the noise of collapsing worlds. Ilara looked into his eyes, and what she saw wasn't fear. It was faith. "I remember you," she whispered. "Every version of me remembers you." Aiden smiled faintly, pain flickering through his expression. "Then remember, this love isn't continuity. It's choice." She closed her eyes and made one. The sound that followed wasn't an explosion, it was silence, drawn out into eternity. Every light around them folded inward, collapsing into a single point within her chest. The energy shifted, inverted, and released in a wave that rippled across the horizon. The continuity core shattered like glass under sunlight. The threads of light rose into the sky, dissolving into dust, scattering like ashes into dawn. The sea below calmed, the smoke vanished, the earth fell still. When the light faded, Ilara stood alone on the ridge. The facility was gone. The machines, the noise, all of it reduced to wind and water. The air was heavy with quiet. She looked down at her hands. No glow, no hum, just skin, just breath. The connection was gone, the network was silent. She had freed them, but Aiden, she turned, searching, but there was no sign of him. Only the echo of his last words lingering in the air like a heartbeat. "Love isn't continuity." Her legs gave out beneath her. She fell to the ground, trembling, her tears mixing with the rain that had begun to fall. Each drop hit the soil with the softness of memory. She thought she had destroyed everything. But as the rain fell, she realized something was still alive, the quiet hum beneath the earth. Faint but steady. Not a machine's rhythm, something gentler. Life somewhere far below, beneath the ruins. The remnants of the continuity energy pulsed faintly, not as control, not as machinery, but as renewal. The network wasn't gone. It had changed. It had chosen something new. And within that pulse she felt a warmth brush against her consciousness, like a whisper touching the edge of a dream. Aiden's voice. "I told you, we'd fall together." Ilara's breath hitched. She closed her eyes, letting the sound of the waves cradle her. The rain fell harder, washing the ash from her hair, her face, her trembling hands. She didn't know if what she heard was real or the last echo of a fading mind. But she smiled anyway, because maybe that was what it meant to be alive, to love something enough to let it go, to let it end. The sky broke open above her, clouds parting just enough for the first rays of morning to spill through. The light touched the surface of the water, turning it to gold. She stood slowly looking out across the sea. The horizon shimmered, alive with quiet possibility. Somewhere out there, something new was beginning, something not built by code or memory, but by choice. Ilara took one last breath of the salt air and stepped forward. The waves reached for her feet, cool and gentle. The ocean stretched endlessly before her, vast and unknowing. And as she walked toward it, her reflection rippled half human, half light until both became one. The tide swallowed her footsteps. The wind carried her name into the open sky. And for the first time, the world felt utterly, beautifully real. The waves had long since calmed. Where fire and thunder once roared, there was only the sound of water folding gently against the shore. Soft, rhythmic, eternal. Morning had deepened into something quieter now, the kind of stillness that only follows great storms, when even the wind seems to hesitate before moving again. From the horizon, light spread like a slow awakening, touching every ripple, every broken stone, every fragment of what once was the Vale estate. The ruins no longer looked violent. They looked at peace, like something that had finally exhaled after years of holding its breath. And in the distance, where the cliffs met the sea, a faint figure moved through the mist, barefoot, quiet, her steps light as memory. Ilara. She was different now, not in the way her eyes glowed, not in the texture of her voice, but in the weight, or rather the absence of it. The hum of machines that had once followed her heartbeat was gone. The world no longer whispered in code through her veins. She was just one consciousness again, no longer Liana's shadow or continuity's vessel, just herself. The ocean breeze tugged at her hair, carrying the scent of salt and new beginnings. For the first time, she wasn't running from what she was or searching for who she used to be. She was simply walking. Her memories remained, every face, every word, every flicker of what the network had shown her, but they no longer hurt the way they once did. They felt like echoes now, softened by time, woven into the rhythm of her breath. Somewhere within them, Aiden's voice lingered, not as a ghost, but as a presence too deeply etched to fade. She reached the edge of the water and paused, looking out at the endless expanse before her. The ocean looked the same as it always had, yet somehow it felt new, as if she was seeing it through eyes that had been reborn 1,000 times and had finally learned how to stay still. Behind her, the land was already beginning to heal. Grass had started to reclaim the cracked stone. Vines stretched toward the light through the remains of the old stairway. The world didn't mourn what it lost. It simply continued, quietly, patiently, reshaping itself one breath at a time. She knelt and dipped her hands into the water. It was cool and alive. For a moment, she thought she saw something beneath the surface, faint glimmers of the continuity energy, shimmering like threads of silver, but when she blinked, they were gone. Maybe they were still there, somewhere deeper, reborn into something that no longer needed control or code. Maybe that was the point. The wind shifted. Somewhere behind her, a voice, faint and almost imagined, whispered her name. Allah. She turned slowly, half afraid, half hoping. The shore was empty. Only the seagrass swayed, but she smiled anyway. She knew that voice. You kept your promise, she said softly, as if the air itself could hear. She closed her eyes and let the sun warm her face. The light wasn't blinding anymore. It was gentle. It carried weight, not the heaviness of machines or memories, but the simple weight of existence. She realized with a small aching sense of wonder that for all the vastness of what she'd seen, the networks that echoes the worlds within worlds, the most extraordinary thing was this. To stand still and feel the wind. She stayed like that for a long time, listening to the silence, which wasn't truly silent at all. It was full of life, of unseen movement, of the quiet persistence that kept the world turning long before her and would continue long after. When she finally opened her eyes, the light on the horizon had shifted again. The sea had taken on a hue she'd never seen before. Not blue, not gold, but something in between, like the moment before dawn when night and day overlap. She realized she didn't know where she was going next. There was no destination now, no program, no command. And strangely, that didn't frighten her. It felt right. The unknown was no longer a threat, it was freedom. She rose, brushing the sand from her hands, and began to walk along the shoreline. With each step, the tide reached toward her feet, as if urging her onward. The cliffs faded behind her, swallowed by mist. Ahead lay nothing but horizon. And somewhere within that vastness, she imagined the others, the fragments of consciousness that had once been trapped inside the network. Maybe they were gone, or maybe they had been woven back into the fabric of the world. A thought reborn as wind, a dream lingering in sunlight, a memory dissolving into rain. Continuity hadn't been destroyed. It had changed form. It had become life again. As she walked, she remembered the first question that had haunted her from the beginning. The one she could never escape. What makes love forbidden when it asks the only thing that makes us human? She knew the answer now, though she would never say it aloud. It wasn't forbidden at all. It was the one thing that could not be replicated, could not be contained, could not be programmed. It existed in the cracks, in the fragile, beautiful imperfections that the system had tried so hard to erase. Maybe that was what Liana had wanted all along, not to live forever, but to understand what it truly meant to live. And maybe what Aiden had seen in Ilara wasn't he, the ghost of someone he'd lost, but the proof that love could survive even after everything else was gone, not as code, but as choice. She stopped walking and turned back one last time. The cliffs were just shadows now, but in the fading light she thought she saw two silhouettes standing side by side, a man and a woman, hand in hand, watching the sea. It could have been her memory playing tricks, or maybe it was something more. Either way, she didn't look away. She let the image rest in her mind until it felt complete. Then she whispered, "Thank you." The wind carried her words away, scattering them into the distance. As the sun began to sink, the sky turned to amber. The ocean mirrored it perfectly, a sheet of fire melting into calm. For a long while, Alara simply stood there, watching the world fold into its evening rhythm. No machines, no voices, just the quiet truth of being. She thought about Liana, about the mistakes that had built her, the pain that had shaped her. She thought about Aiden and the moment he had reached for her through the light. And she thought about herself, the woman who had been both and neither, who had carried 1,000 lives inside her only to discover that the most important one was her own. Maybe that was the final secret of the continuity protocol, that in trying to preserve life forever, they had overlooked its most essential quality, that it ends. And that ending, that fragile boundary between what was and what isn't, is what gives everything meaning. She smiled softly, the kind of smile that feels like forgiveness. The tide rose higher, wrapping around her ankles, her knees. The sea reflected the sky's final blaze before surrendering to dusk. She felt no fear, only belonging, as if every heartbeat, every choice, every memory had led her exactly here. She whispered into the wind, her voice gentle, certain. We were never meant to last forever. We were meant to remember. The light dimmed and the horizon swallowed the sun. When the first stars appeared, the shoreline was empty. Only footprints remained, slowly fading as the waves reached up to claim them. And yet, if you stood there long enough, you might have sworn the air itself still carried her presence, not as a ghost or a machine, but as something simpler. A whisper in the rhythm of the sea. The world turned. The night deepened, and somewhere beyond the horizon where memory ends and possibility begins, a new voice stirred, soft, human, awake. What are we? It asked, the silence, if not the stories we choose to become. The sea gave no answer. It didn't need to. The world had already begun again.